Welcome to the Breakaway Podcast, recorded on the campus of Texas A&M. For more information, check out our website at breakawayministries.org. We hope you enjoy the message.
Well, for the men here, I don't know what you would consider to be the most testosterone man movie of all times, but for me, I would have to say Braveheart is probably pretty high on the list. And I know Braveheart came out before every single one of you were born, but you need to see the movie. It's a great movie. And the thing that makes Braveheart such a great movie is that it is full of these incredible quotes. And by far my favorite quote in the entire movie, which has everything to do with what we're talking about tonight, is this moment where William Wallace has, it's a very serious moment where he simply declares this: "Every man dies, not every man really lives." Okay, that was terrible, all right. But listen to what he's saying. He says this, he says, "Every man dies, not every man really lives." He says, "Every man dies," and that's a true statement, right? No one hears that and says, "Well, it's debatable, no one can know for sure." No, we get it. Every man dies. But then he goes on and says something very profound. He says, "But not every man really lives." And if William Wallace is correct, then what that means is that there are people in this stadium tonight who will go through life and never truly experience the fullness of life, the fullness of joy and peace and satisfaction and purpose that we all long for. You realize that's what we all long for, right? It doesn't matter who you are in this place, whether you are spiritual or skeptical, religious or irreligious, every single one of us longs for the same exact thing. We all want to experience the most life, the most joy, the most peace, the most satisfaction, and the most purpose possible. I mean, think about it. If we were to just call this the scale of life, 1 being no life at all, 10 being life to the full, where do you hope to land? Like, where would you say that you're landing right now? No one thinks about the scale of life and just says, "You know what, I'll settle in at a 4 or 5 because mediocrity is kind of how I roll. Like, I can get on board with mediocrity." No, we all long for an 8, 9, or 10. It doesn't matter who you are. But you want to know why many of us will go through life and stall out at a 4, 5, or 6? You want to know why many of us will feel like this life that we long for is always just beyond our fingertips? The reason that many of us will go through life and die but never truly live is because something will be broken in our lives and we won't allow Jesus to step in and heal it. If you were to take this book and you were to read through especially the Gospels, what you would find out about Jesus Christ is that he is in the business of healing that which is broken. And I promise you, if you want to be someone who goes through life and truly lives, you will have to become acquainted with Jesus Christ as healer. And it all begins with you answering the question that Jesus asks in John chapter 5. So if you have a Bible, I want you to turn with me tonight to John chapter 5. That's where we're going to be. John chapter 5. If you were with us last week, then you know that we began a series that we are calling Trajectory, 5 semester-shaping questions from Jesus. And here's what we said. If you were to read this book, you would see that Jesus Christ loved to ask questions. And his questions were never just intended for his immediate audience. His questions were intended for each one of us. And his questions are so important that your answers to his questions will in many ways define who you are and determine how you live. They will impact the trajectory, not just of your semester, but of your life and oftentimes your eternity. The question that's on the table for each one of us tonight is simply this: do you want to be healed? So here we go, John chapter 5. Let me read you verses 1 through 3 because it's going to kind of set the scene for us. It says this: "After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. So the author starts out and he just sets the scene. He says Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, and when he gets there, he goes to this place. It's the pool of Bethesda. And the author kind of fills us in and says that the pool of Bethesda is a gathering place for invalids. That word invalid is a general term that refers to those who are sick, weak, or powerless. And the author gives us some examples of people who are in attendance. There are those who are blind, lame, meaning crippled, or those who are paralyzed. Now, here's how I want you to think of these people. I want you to think of these people as those who have something broken in their lives. So he says that there are blind people in attendance. Well, if someone's blind, then in a sense, their eyes are broken. They're not working as they should. And he says that there are people who are lame and paralyzed, crippled and paralyzed, meaning that they have legs that are in a sense broken. They're not working as they should. So you combine that truth with the fact that the word invalid carries the meaning of powerless, and here's what we know about the Pool of Bethesda. We know that the Pool of Bethesda is a gathering place for those who have something broken in their lives and they feel powerless to do anything about it. Now, I need to make a clarifying statement, and I don't want you to miss this. This is very important. If you or someone you know has a physical disability, then I need you to hear me say tonight that I'm in no way trying to imply that if you have a physical disability, you can't experience fullness of life. That's not true. In reality, I think a lot of times those who have physical disabilities experience more life, more joy, more peace, and more satisfaction than those who have no physical disability. But I firmly believe that the picture that the author John is trying to paint here in this story is a picture of some people who are missing out on life. It's a group of people who on a scale of life, 1 being no life at all, 10 being life to the full, would probably land somewhere at a 1 or a 2. Why? Because something is broken in their lives and they feel powerless to do anything about it. Okay? Now I need all eyes on me. Please do not miss this. Here's the thought that I had as I was studying this text. The thought that I had was simply this. What if this stadium tonight, Kyle Field, in College Station, right here in September 2016, what if this stadium is a lot like the Pool of Bethesda? What if this place tonight is a gathering place for a bunch of people who have something broken in their lives and they feel powerless to do anything about it? And you might hear that and you might say, you know what, I can't resonate with that at all. You're not talking about me. I don't have anything broken in my life. But let me just ask you to think about this. If the majority of decisions that you make, like what you wear or what you eat or what you post, if the majority of the decisions that you make are driven by your need for someone to approve of you, accept you, like you in person or on social media, or just think you're cool, can't we agree that there's something broken about that? Because the reality is your life is just one big audition. Your life is just one perpetual episode of the TV show The Voice. You are constantly auditioning before a panel of people like your friends or your parents or even complete strangers at the gym. Your life is just one big audition. There is something broken about that. If you lie or exaggerate or tell half-truths about who you are, what you have, or what you've done so that people will think more highly of you, can't we agree that something's short-circuiting? Something's not working as it should? Or if you only see the negatives in yourself, like you look in the mirror, you look at a number on a scale and you hate what you see, and you look at your personality and you despise your personality and all you can see is your flaws, can't we agree that there's something broken there? Or if you're an angry person, like you just wake up angry, you don't even know why you're angry. You just wake up angry, and when you are angry, you can be explosive or manipulative towards the people who love you. Can't we agree that there's something broken there? Or guys, if girls would view you as a player, if you're someone who will tell girls whatever they want to hear so that you can get whatever you want, if you will manipulate them, if you will toy with their hearts, and you can see the pain and the hurt that you cause them, and it really doesn't bother you that much, can't we agree that there's something broken there? Or if you constantly run back to the things that you don't want to do, whether it's looking at porn or drinking too much or using drugs or manipulating your diet in an unhealthy way or cutting yourself, can't we agree that something is broken? And if something is broken, can't we agree that you are missing out on life? Because you're missing out on the life that you would be experiencing if that which was broken was actually working as it should. You know what? Throughout the years, God has revealed various big areas of brokenness in my life, whether it's an issue with lust or bitterness and resentment towards someone who has wronged me or an unhealthy need for people's approval. Most recently, God has revealed that I just have a negative outlook on life. Like I regularly see the worst in myself, in others, and in life in general. Have you ever been around someone who is constantly negative? It is draining. And I can just tell you, having a negative outlook on life, it is exhausting. I'll just speak for myself and tell you, man, something's broken. And I've been missing out on life. What is it for you? What's broken in your life? What's causing you to miss out on life? Look back at the text, verse 5. The story now zooms in on one guy in particular. It says this: one man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. I want to put it in the language that we're using tonight. There's a man in particular who has had something broken in his life for 38 years. Here's what that means. It means that this guy has been missing out on life for 38 years. You want to make yourself feel a little crazy? You probably don't want to do that, but just go with me here. If you want to make yourself feel a little crazy, then just answer this question. How long have you allowed something to be broken in your life? Because that will tell you just how long you have allowed yourself to miss out on life. Shortly after I graduated from college here at Texas A&M, I went and worked for a church. And after a year, I left that church feeling very wounded and hurt, especially by three men on staff at this church. And after I left that church, bitterness and resentment moved in and made themselves at home in my life. And bitterness and resentment for 4 years controlled me. I couldn't drive past that church or hear these three guys' names without having this negative emotional response inside of me. When I heard their names, I resented their successes and I inwardly celebrated their failures. I became that drama friend. Because anytime I would hang out with my friends, I would just spill my bitterness and resentment out onto them. After 4 years, I think God had finally just had enough of it. And so in his grace, he beautifully brought healing in my life, and he restored those relationships. But when I look back on that 4-year season, I can confidently say, man, I missed out on life for 4 years straight. I missed out on life because bitterness and resentment moved in, made themselves at home, and completely controlled me. Ask yourself this question: how long have you been looking at porn? How long have you been auditioning for the approval of your parents, of a friend? How long have you been angry? How long have you held on to anger, bitterness, and resentment towards someone who has wronged you? How long have you been a player? How long have you been running back to things like drinking too much or manipulating your diet or cutting yourself? That will tell you just how long you've been missing out on life. When I was in 6th grade, my brother and I were planning to fly from Dallas to Austin, and my cousin took us to the airport, Dallas Love Field. And it had been raining that day, and my cousin was the one with the umbrella. And what he had was simply this janky umbrella that didn't have a handle on the bottom. It was just the metal end. And we were in the terminal, and it was just this freak deal where my cousin asked me if I had something to write with. And so as I was bending down, looking in my backpack for something to write with, my cousin randomly threw the umbrella on the ground, and it popped open, and that metal end shot straight up and hit me directly in my right eye. And I went into the bathroom, and I pulled down my eyelid, and there was this massive red abrasion. And it didn't hurt that I was crying like a little girl, or a little boy, if that offends you girls. Either way, I was crying. And the way things played out was that I had to go to the emergency room, and after they put drops in my eyes, they hooked me up with a sweet eye patch. And just to fill you in on how sweet this thing was, I will never forget it in my life, because it was this blue fabric with this white fabric on top of the blue fabric, and then on that white fabric was a picture of a Dalmatian dog. So basically in 6th grade, I was just walking around proclaiming, please give me a swirly, all right, with my sweet white Dalmatian eye patch. But after I got rid of that sweet eye patch, what ended up developing in my right eye was what's called an eye floater, which basically means that I see black dots in my right eye permanently. Like right now, I see black dots right here. And for the first year of having this eye floater, I didn't know that it was an eye floater. So I just thought that there was a mosquito constantly following me around. I kid you not, I'd be like, and I could not get that thing out of there. And then I realized he was here to stay. And then he got some friends. And so now I literally see several black dots right here. But I've just gotten used to it over time. Like, I've just gotten used to life with an eye floater. I've just gotten used to bad eyesight. The world that I know is a world with black dots right here. And the reason that I tell you that is that I wonder if many of us do the same thing with our brokenness. I wonder if many of us allow brokenness to remain in our lives for so long that we just get used to it. And the world that we know is a world where something is broken in our lives. And what ends up happening is we just begin to believe that that brokenness is who we are. And we begin to believe the lie that life at a 5 or a 6 is actually life at a 7, 8, 9, or 10. That's why I think many guys and girls will say, you know what, looking at porn, it's just not that big of a deal. I mean, I'm a college student. That's just kind of what we do. You know what, partying on the weekends, that's just what we do. It's just not that big of a deal. You know what, I'm just an angry person. I'm just an insecure person. That's just who I am. You need to accept me for who I am. You need to know you've bought into a lie. Jesus interrupts this man's life with a question. Look at verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" Do you want to be healed? Just put yourself in this story. Can you imagine this? Here's a guy who's been paralyzed for 38 years, and then Jesus just walks up and matter-of-factly asks, "Do you want to be healed?" I just imagine this guy sitting there being like, "I'm sorry, you're going to need to repeat your question because I could have sworn you just said, 'Do you want to be healed?' And that would be coconuts." But Jesus walks up, and in a moment in time, he asks a question that assumes that the impossible is possible. After 38 years, I mean, think about it. This guy has seen himself for 38 years through the lens of his paralysis. Society has seen this guy through the lens of his paralysis. And then Jesus invades his life in a moment in time and assumes that everything can change. Do you believe that in your life tonight? That no matter how many times you've tried to change or step away from certain things, do you believe that the impossible just might be possible in your life if Jesus shows up and heals that which is broken? Do you believe that? At the same time, I think it's important for us to acknowledge the fact that Jesus asked the guy if he even wanted to be healed. What's the guy going to say to that? No thanks, dude, I'm good, but I bet that blind guy over there would love to talk to you, but I'm good. No. Of course he would want to be healed. But it's interesting that Jesus asked, because if you were to read this book, you would see that Jesus didn't always ask. A lot of times he would just walk up and say, get up, or be healed, or the demons come out, or he'd take some mud and he would rub it in people's eyes. But he asks, do you want to be healed? And I think it's a really valid question. I think it's a very important question for us tonight. Do you even want to be healed? Because here's the thing. If Jesus steps in and heals that which is broken in your life, things are going to change. Sin is going to be uprooted from your life. And it might require some hard work and effort. Things are going to change. There's a reason that you keep running back to certain sins, because they are enjoyable. And at least for a moment, they can be satisfying. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to sit in counseling situations with a lot of students who are in dating relationships. And there's been several times where I'll be sitting with a guy or a girl and they're telling me about their relationship, and it is just abundantly clear that it is a very unhealthy relationship. And so the wisdom and the counsel I give them is to get out. You want to know why they don't end up taking my advice? Here's what they say. And I guarantee you that there are people all over the place who have said this before. I have said this before. Here's what they say. I just can't imagine my life without him in it. I just can't imagine my life without her in it. So think about what they're saying. What they're saying is, hey, you know what? I can sit here and acknowledge that this might be an unhealthy relationship. I acknowledge that this relationship might be stealing life from me. But at the same time, I just want to acknowledge that this relationship is still giving me some life. It might be stealing more life than it's giving, but I'm scared to get out of it because I fear that I will miss the life that it is giving me. And I wonder if some of us are just in the same place with our brokenness tonight. Jesus is asking the question, do you even want to be healed? And if you're really honest, something in you feels the same way. I like looking at porn. I don't know if I can imagine my life without that outlet. I like partying on the weekends. I don't know what life will be like if I have to find new friends or make different plans. I don't know what my life would be like without cutting because it makes me feel like I'm in control. I don't know if I can envision a life without this bitterness or resentment, because if I basically let go of my bitterness and resentment, then what I'm saying is that that person who wronged me wins. So Jesus, if you're asking the question, do you want to be healed? And if I'm honest with myself, the answer is no. The answer is no. Do you even want to be healed? Look at how this man responds. Verse 7, the sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm going, another steps down before me. So Jesus asks the question, do you want to be healed? And here's what he says. He says, yeah, I kind of do want to be healed, but here's the problem, Jesus. I don't have anyone to help put me into the water when the water is stirred up. Now, I think that this guy's response to Jesus is right and wrong at the same time. Let me tell you why it's an accurate response. It's accurate because he believes he's going to need the help of other people if he's going to get healed. And that is true. You need to know Jesus rarely heals in isolation. Jesus oftentimes uses his people to heal his people. So let me just ask you, do you have a few men or a few women in your life with whom you can be fully known and fully loved? Do you have a small army of people who can celebrate your strengths, yet then they've seen behind the curtain of your life and they're very familiar with the brokenness in it? And they love you enough not to tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. You need to know the Christian life has always been meant to be personal, but never private. That's why this guy's response is right. Let me tell you why his response is wrong. There was this superstition around the pool of Bethesda. What people believed was that every once in a while, an angel would come and stir the waters. And the first person in the waters after it was stirred would be healed. The reason that this guy's response is wrong is that he believes that there is another source of healing besides Jesus Christ. You need to know if you're going to experience healing from the brokenness in your life, it's going to have everything to do with Jesus. Let me tell you why. At the root of all brokenness is sin. Like, we can look out into this world, and many of us can look out and watch the news, and we can say, this world is a broken place. At the root of that brokenness is sin. And Jesus Christ, who is the only person who has ever successfully dealt with sin. That's what he did on the cross. Jesus Christ, who wasn't as God, stepped out of heaven and into earth. He voluntarily took the sins of the world upon himself. He was crucified on a cross. And on that cross, he endured the wrath of God, and he was put in a tomb. But on the third day, the stone was rolled away, and he rose from the dead as a display that sin and death had been conquered. So that's why I say, if you're going to experience any healing in your life, it's going to have everything to do with Jesus, because Jesus Christ is the only one who has ever looked at sin and death and says, you have been conquered. Watch how things play out for this man. Verses 8 and 9. Jesus said to him, get up, take up your bed and walk. And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Just put yourself in this story. Here's a guy who has been paralyzed for 38 years, and in a moment in time, Jesus steps in. And what are the words to him? Get up. And in that moment, this tingling sensation enters his toes. That's new. He's never felt that before. And then that tingling sensation spreads throughout the entirety of his foot. And then it begins to make its way up his calf and then into his thighs. And it becomes this moment of truth where it's like, man, this is happening. And I don't know if you've ever watched a 1-year-old who's kind of pulling up on something, or a baby when they stand up for the first time, but they just have this look of like, this is different. Like, the way things look up here is way different than it looked down there. And I don't know if this guy just shot up and started doing the running man, or if he just kind of took his time and it was shaky. But just imagine that moment in time where he takes his first step, and right as his foot hits the ground, he shoots up the scale of life. In that moment in time when Jesus invades his life, he goes from a 1 or a 2 to a 9 or a 10. Why? Because that's what Jesus is in the business of doing. He's in the business of moving people up the scale. And he does it by healing that which is broken. You know what? Maybe you're here tonight and you're hearing me talk about this scale of life, 1 being no life at all, 10 being life to the full, and you're like, you know what does a 9 or a 10 even look like? The reality is it looks different for every person here. And there's so much more to say about it than we can cover tonight, but at least what we're talking about tonight if you're going to experience life in joy, in peace, it will have everything to do with Jesus Christ healing that which is broken in your life. This is what he's in the business of doing. I have watched Jesus Christ move people up the scale by healing them from an addiction to pornography. I've watched Jesus move people up the scale by healing them from an eating disorder. I stood with a guy just a month ago who showed me the scars, and as he was showing me the scars, he talked about how Jesus moved him up the scale by healing him of self-hate and cutting. I've experienced firsthand Jesus Christ moving me up the scale by healing me of anger, bitterness, and resentment toward those who have wronged me in my life. Let me just ask you, what if Jesus wants to start moving you up the scale tonight? What if he wants to step in and begin to heal that which is broken? And maybe you sit here and you already feel defeated because you hear me saying this and you're like, I've tried. You can't imagine how many years I've been asking Jesus to heal me. You can't imagine how long I've been running back to the same things over and over and over. This is not what I want to be doing, yet I keep running back to it. Maybe it'd just give you some comfort for me to say this. You know what? There's rare occasions where Jesus heals instantaneously, just like he did in this story. But more often than not, Jesus' healing in our lives is a process. For some, it will be a lifelong process. But think about this. Isn't a 4 better than a 3? Like, isn't a 5.5 better than a 5? The great news is that even in the midst of the process, God's love for us is strong. Jesus went to the cross and paid fully for all of our sins. That means his grace is sufficient to cover over all of your failures along the way. What if Jesus Christ wants to move you up the scale tonight? William Wallace was right. Every man dies. Not every man really lives. You want to be someone who goes through life and truly lives. I promise you, you will have to become acquainted with Jesus Christ as healer. And it begins with you answering this same question that he asked the man in John chapter 5. Do you want to be healed?